Hello viewers, and welcome to episode 6 of F1 Talk. And in this edition I would like to go over the career of one of F1's elder statesmen, the former F1 driver, the Italian Jarno Trulli. And news earlier on this month, actually, as we're still just in February, that he had been replaced at Caterham by Vitaly Petrov. I thought I would post a little bit of a somewhat tribute video just going over his career in minor detail. I personally think Trulli was, just as the paddock said he was a qualifying specialist. He more often than not failed to produce results in the race. I cannot say he was one of the best drivers in F1, but his professional approach to the sport meant that teams that hired him would always go forward in what they were aiming to achieve. He wasn't the best racer, and more often than not had a trail of cars behind him, which was come to affectionately known as the Trulli Train. And there was a heck of a lot of drivers at that time, sort of like mid-2000s, were saying that he shouldn't really be in F1 if he's going to hold us up all the time. But that was then, and unfortunately, as I speak to you, he is no longer a Formula 1 driver. But Jarno Trulli was born on July the 13th, 1974, and from a very early age he was, just driving around in karts, as most F1 drivers do. I mean, they're driving in karts from the age of 5, but he continued to hone his craft, and in 1991 he won the World Karting Championship. And this surprised everyone, because at the time, there were several other drivers that are on the grid today that could have won. I mean, Mark Webber being one of them, I do believe. And it showed promise, as you do at that age. I mean, you try to show what you're going to be good at. He'd win other races, things like that, but nothing more important than the German F3 Championship in 1996. Now, I said it was going to be minor detail, and it is minor detail, especially up to his F1 career start. Noticed by the Minardi team, they signed him up to a contract for the 1997 season. He made his debut with Minardi and sort of impressed most people, because at the time, obviously, Minardi were the minnows of the sport. They couldn't exactly compete with the bigger teams, and as you know, they folded in 2005. But after 7 races, Alain Prost, who was the owner of his own team at that time, the former Ligier team, he brought in Trulli to replace Olivier Panis, who broke both his legs in a horrible accident. I think it was at it was obviously before the Austrian Grand Prix, but I can't quite remember when it was. But he broke both his legs. It might have even been the French Grand Prix, I'm not too sure. But he did rather well in the Prost. He scored several points finishes, and was even leading the Austrian Grand Prix at one stage, and he was set to finish second. But I remember the disappointment when he got out of the car after his engine blew. He was slumped over the tyre, and when you are second like that in a big sport, you get your first trophy and things like that, you can't really do much. He scored his first podium a couple of seasons later at the European Grand Prix at the German track Nürburgring, which now alternates as the host of the German Grand Prix. And apart from that, the tenure with Prost was a bit troublesome. Not the fact that he was in trouble with Prost and the team, it was the fact that the Peugeot engine that they used just wasn't up to scratch. The McLaren Peugeot of 94, I think it was nowhere near as good as what it should have been, and hence, from then on, they barely produced results. They were with Jordan for a couple of years, And speaking of Jordan, Trulli moved to Jordan in the year 2000 and was there for 2000 and 2001. And this was the time that the Trulli Train sort of began. He would hold up, drivers that should have easily been able to pass him. I'm talking about guys like Barrichello, and that it was sort of like a Honda battle. You had the Jordans, who were Mugen Honda, and eventually moved to Honda factory engines, and they were up against the BARs at that time, who are now, if you go forward in incarnations, who are now the Braun, moved to Honda. They were Braun, and now they're the Mercedes team. But there were terrible, trails of cars behind Trulli, nicknamed the Trulli Train in the media and the press, and this infuriated him because he'd get like fourth on the grid or fifth on the grid, and he'd move backwards straight away, which was why I was surprised in 2002 when he moved to Renault. I think at the time he was under the management of Flavio Briatore, who had just returned to F1 at that stage. But in 2002, he moved alongside Jenson Button at the Renault team, who had just taken over the reins from Benetton again. And he more often than not out-qualified Button at Renault in 2002. But Button's talent began to shine through. The car had the greatest start system on the grid. It was even better than the Ferrari, which was easily the best car at the time. But Button would blitz him in the races, which again questioned Trulli's ability to do the job, especially in race trim. I mean, if you wanted someone to get your qualifying done and then switch to another driver in a race, then Trulli was your man. No doubt about it. 2003, Button had been ousted basically in favour of Fernando Alonso. I think in retrospect, Briatore and Renault would have probably wanted to keep Jenson on rather than get rid of him, but it led to bigger and better things for Jenson. But as for Trulli, 2003 and most of 2004, he was outclassed by Alonso. I mean, that's when Alonso really started to grab the ball by the horns and move forward in his career. German Grand Prix, he got his second podium in his career in 2003. I remember his, not elation, but his relief, I think, because from 03 onwards, the Renault was starting to build up to the class and the speed we knew it had in 2005, 2006. And in 2004, as we all know, he won the Monaco Grand Prix by about that much, Jenson Button. It was a good race, especially the last stint of the race. One of the two drivers was going to win the first Grand Prix, and very reminiscent of the 92 Monaco Grand Prix. He was able to keep Button behind him, much like Senna kept Mansell behind him at that particular stage, and it was a good race. And at that time, Jarno's career was at its peak, and it would never get there again, sadly. I liked Trulli. He was a laugh, and with his gains he bought a vineyard in France, and that's obviously where his time is going to be spent now. But as I say, back to 2004, and the moment I think that defines Trulli's career, sadly, is one of, I wouldn't say defeat, but I would say one of inability or miscalculation on his part. Was the last corner incident at the French Grand Prix in 2004. He was in third place. Alonso just crossed the finishing line, I think, in first place, winning the Grand Prix. And I think Schumacher was second, or it might have been the other way around, but Trulli was third. And going into the last couple of corners, he was trying to hold off Rubens Barrichello, and looked all set to do so. But something either went wrong with the car or he just lost concentration, and Barrichello passed him on the outside. And that inspired the wrath of Briatore. And from then on, Trulli's relationship with Renault sort of deteriorated so much to the point that for the last 3 races, just before the at that time it probably would have been something like Japan or China that season, because that was the season of the first Chinese Grand Prix. He was sacked. He got booted out of the team, but he'd already signed a contract for Toyota, and for the last couple of races of this 2004 season, he signed for Toyota, and it was sort of his salvation, so to speak. He started to gain confidence in himself again, because when you get a sack like that, it's demoralising for a start, because you failed to meet targets or you've done something wrong or whatever. But he didn't do that wrong. He was scoring points consistently for Renault, but at the time Renault were becoming a championship threat, and it was easy to see that, you know, points finishes like 5th, 6th, 3rds, 4ths just weren't going to cut it anymore for especially Renault. You know, he's partnered by Ralf Schumacher for the majority of his time at Toyota, apart from 2009 when Timo Glock was his partner, his teammate. And the next sort of point of interest as far as Trulli's career was concerned was a couple of points finishes here or there, but the next point of interest was in 2009 at the first Grand Prix season in Melbourne, Australia. There was the safety car debacle with Hamilton. And if you've seen the videos, you quite clearly see Hamilton pass him after the safety car because Trulli goes off track. He loses control. Now that's a good example of why Trulli probably didn't get a race winning or championship winning car under him. But he went off track and Hamilton passed him. Now, in my estimation, if you go off track for whatever reason, you slip, you spin, you get past, even if it's under a yellow flag like it was at the time, because of a crash with Sebastian Vettel and Robert Kubica. Even if it's under yellow flag, if you spin off, then surely that race result would stand. But you know, that's the rules, that's the FIA for you. But the thing is, it was all, you know, Hamilton took bad advice, and you know, Trulli was awarded the 3rd place that he got in the race eventually, and Hamilton went backwards, having a terrible season, as we know. And apart from that, he got pole position at Bahrain in 2009. Really thought, because it was an all Toyota front row at Bahrain 2009, I remember it well, and you just thought that for once Toyota were going to finally get the race win they were looking for, but they didn't. The pace of the Brawn, the pace of the Red Bull of Vettel at that time, you know, Button won the race, Vettel second, and because of the tyre choices and tyre strategy, because they both, at the time, you had to use soft and hard tyres like you do now, you know, Toyota chose the wrong tyres. They chose the right tyres for qualifying, but for the race, no chance. And he finished 3rd, and that was his last ever podium. Toyota's performance then went down, 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 to the point where Toyota pulled out of F1 at the end of 2009. Basically handing both of their drivers at the time, both Trulli and Timo Glock, the unenviable task of trying to find a new seat for the 2010 season. Both of them ended up being first choice drivers for 2 of the new teams. Glock went to Virgin, which is now Marussia, and Trulli went to Lotus, who are now Caterham. But as of yet, there is no Caterham merchandise. Hence the reason I'm wearing Lotus cap. Basically, the new teams are development cars, with Lotus easily the best equipped and best funded team of the three. I cannot say what their futures are going to be. I personally think both Marussia and Hispania will not be in F1 much longer. Could very well be entering their last seasons. But Caterham are equipped. They've got the right people in the jobs. Mike Gascoigne is a very good technical director, and they seem to be going around the right way. Basically, Trulli was brought in as a development driver. They spent 2010 and 2011, going over the car as to what should be going on. And 2010 basically went without incident, really. They finished races more often than not. I think there was one race where both of them failed to finish, but apart from that, Lotus did rather well. In 2011, last season, they were rebranded to Team Lotus rather than Lotus Racing. And it was quite comical, because more often than not, the BBC would talk to Jarno after qualifying one, and he would complain up to mid-season about the fact he didn't have power steering. So he was actually fighting the car at every corner. And a couple of races later, I think it was at the Italian Grand Prix, funnily enough, that he got power steering, and he was so much happier. He out-qualified Kovalainen, his teammate, I think every race after that. He was in one pre-season test for the 2012 season, and he was replaced by Vitaly Petrov soon after. Now, I'm very confident that Petrov, he will improve, as Kovalainen has, I think, by being in a slower car than what he's used to, because you've got to fight for it. It makes you become a better driver if you've got worse equipment and things like that. Now, the end of his career, he'll probably go into sports cars, or he has been approached by a NASCAR team, and it's sad that his career is over. But at 37, you've got to take into consideration all of the good times, but you've also got to take into consideration the bad times. More often than not, and I know I keep saying that, but more often than not, he would have a trail of cars behind him, 4 or 5 or 6 cars, maybe even more at times, that were just waiting to get past, or waiting for him to pit so they could get past. And I wouldn't say he was necessarily a born racer, but he did his job. I'm actually happy that he is leaving F1. He wasn't necessarily a character, but he was always willing to speak to the commentary teams and interviews and stuff like that. And with Caterham, changing their name, also probably moving up the field, hopefully this season, if not, because I think they were just on the brink of scoring points. A little bit more luck here or there in a couple of races last season and the season before, they would have got their first couple of points. But you need drivers that will push hard. Not to say that Jarno Trulli couldn't push hard, but what I'm saying is he would do more in qualifying than he would in the race. In my opinion, Trulli should be remembered as what he was: a good team player, an excellent qualifier, I would say most of the time, outperforming the machinery he was in. He never really had a race-winning car, apart from the 2004 Monaco Grand Prix, which he did actually win from pole to finish. But apart from that, he didn't really have a race-winning car under his control. So, farewell, Jarno. You've given us some good memories, and I hope you achieve everything you want to in the future. So, for this edition of F1 Talk, I'll see you next time.